appoint a 29-year-old inexperienced civilian to the rank of brigadier in crime intelligence? I'm asking the question. Who is this young lady, in bracket Mokwele, for whom 6 generals in the SAPS are risking losing their jobs for? What did the generals stand to gain or expect to gain, in bracket quid pro quo, by giving her gratification, which is the position or the job? What did they stand to gain? I don't have that evidence in the docket. 3.8, what are we saying? Are we saying the generals gave Mokwele a position, stroke a job in crime intelligence in order for Mokwele to do the following? To do what? I'm asking them. What did Mokwele have to do in terms of Roman figure 1 to 4 of Preka? 3.10, did she give or promise to give any quid pro quo to the generals? In law, she does not have to. But there must at least be an understanding between Mokwele and the generals that the job is given to her for a particular unlawful reason, in brackets, in order for her to act unlawfully as set out in Roman figure 1 to 4. She was just a young lady occupying an ordinary position at BMW at the time. I cannot see that there was anything she could offer to these generals, in brackets, except giving them cash as a thank you, or if she was having a relationship with one of the male panel members, stroke generals. I'm trying to find out why are they giving him a job which, according to the state, she was not deserving to get, and what did she do in return, or what was expected from her? 12, did the team subpoena the bank accounts of the generals and Mokwele to ascertain if she did not make any payments to them for giving her a job? If not, why not? 3.13, were the cell phone records of the generals and Mokwele obtained and analyzed for any communication relating to the application for the post, preparation for interviews, or discussions about payments? If not, why not? 3.14, were computers that were used by the generals during the period in question seized and or mirror imaged to look for communication between them and Mokwele, or, in brackets, or anyone related or associated with Mokwele, prior to or during and after the interview process? If not, why was this not done? 3.15, did the team investigate any possible family relations between Mokwele and any of the generals that formed part of the panel? Paragraph 4, colleagues, the appointment of this young lady to such a position does not make sense and is suspicious, but suspicion alone is not enough. There is a reason why she had to be appointed, and that reason is our answer. It is the quid pro quo. We must look for it, I'm saying. Paragraph 5, otherwise we remain with fraud regarding the flaunting of processes to appoint her. Yes, her shortlisting and eventual appointment was fraudulent because she was inexperienced, in brackets, which was one of the requirements for the position. Many other applicants were disqualified for lack of managerial experience. How did she make it to the top 5 and eventually top 3? 6, she also made misrepresentations in her CV, in brackets, I'm saying fraud. The investigator should follow up the validity of the project management certificate at Stellenbosch University. 7, she also claims to have been top of her class in her first year studies for MBA. She does not say where she was registered for the MBA and whether she eventually completed it. I must say later, with the investigation, it became clear that she had finished the MBA. So that information was secured after I've raised all these questions. But when she submitted the application, she only completed it after submitting I think a month after, in May 2024, whereas the application was in
But let me just correct you there, because in her application on page 265, that very issue you are raising, she did say that she's still busy with the MBA and she will only complete it. If you look at page 66, bottom of the page, it is expected. So at the time of submission, she did not have it, and she said so in her CV. And in fact, in her job application on page 263, the only 3 qualifications she lists as being relevant to her application. In other words, she says, I have this many other qualifications, but they are not necessary for this application because what the job requirements, what the job description requires is these 3. And then she lists all 3 of them on page 263 of file 2. She says BTech industrial engineering, and then she says the national diploma in mechatronics engineering, mechatronics. So she was saying to subs, for the purposes of my application, you need only look at these 2 because that's what the advert requires. I have these other things, but they are not relevant to the application. So she made that very clear. There should have been no reason to go look for things that she's not relying on for the purposes of the application. They are mentioned only in her CV because she gives a full description of what she's doing and what she's all about.
I agree, Commissioner Kumalo, and I can say that those were later clarified. The fact that she has a project management certificate, it was clarified, and affidavit was obtained from Stellenbosch University to that effect.
There wasn't even a need to do that because she was not relying on that qualification to apply for this position.
Yes.
It's a by the way that is mentioned in the CV to say, by the way, I've done these other things, but for the purposes of my application for this position, I am only relying on my BTech and my diploma. That's all.
I agree, Commissioner. It's just that when the markings were done for the interview, one of the and I think it also comes up in the email where I'm saying, but also she was given more scores by the panel for educational qualifications compared to Van Vuren and Bapela. And SACA only confirms her matric, diploma, and degree in engineering. I'll wait for your input. SEPO arrange a meeting. Indeed, for purposes of the application of this position, those qualifications were not even relevant. But the fact that when the panel members are scoring, they consider and the educational qualifications of applicants comparing one to another, we needed to satisfy ourselves that she has those, in case they were taken into consideration when the panel was marking.
Yes, but you can't say then she committed fraud. I mean, if the panel takes additional things into consideration, the applicant can be accused of fraud.
No,
what the applicant has put forward is what is required, and those have been verified.
True, I agree with what the Commissioner is saying, and I don't think there was any misrepresentation that was alleged in the charge sheet regarding the project management and the MBA, because as Commissioner is saying, indeed, in her application, she says that the MBA is going to be finalized in future. In fact, it was only finalized a month after the application was submitted.
And this thing here in paragraph 6, that she also made misrepresentations in her CV. I mean, that is not correct.
Commissioner Kumal, perhaps because we also tried to get clarity on this, perhaps explain what you meant by misrepresentations amounting to fraud in her CV.
Right. I'm calling it fraud, Commissioners, because she says in her CV, I've been a middle manager in BMW since, I think she says 2016 or 2017, from the year she started working. And we obtained affidavits, or at least at the time when I read the documents, there were affidavits from BMW, from human resource official, and from a person to whom Mokwele was reporting. Both of them say Mokwele was never a manager in BMW. She was not a supervisor in BMW, and therefore, for her to claim in the application that she was a middle manager amounted to a misrepresentation.
Advocate
Not-
Serunye,
Yes. Commissioner.
what you say in paragraph 6 and what you are being asked are two different things. You say in paragraph 6, she also made misrepresentations in her CV, in brackets fraud. The investigator should follow up on the validity of the project management certificate. But you confirm that that was done. So that's not the issue. And then the CV itself is on file 2, page 265. I have been through this CV. And what you are saying is simply not in this CV, unless you can point to me
Get me the thing.
where that misrepresentation, which amounts to fraud, is set out there. File 2 on page 265. And it's a short CV, it's only 3 pages, so it's not very long.
Commissioner, I'm looking at the CV and maybe in relation to where she says middle manager, it's not coming out of the CV, but out of the application itself.
Yes.
But what she says on the CV, which is a misrepresentation, is on page 267, on the last page of the CV, under accomplishment, some of the project work.
Advocate Serunye, let's agree that 267, where you are reading, it deals with successes achieved in the current role. Because she says, I successfully implemented first robotic process, I saved the company 1 million in IT security, I saved 500,000 in annual maintenance, I reduced the electronic tools management.
Yeah.
That's all she says. And in fact, the affidavit from the BMW manager says, well, I can't confirm these things because maybe other people can. That's what he says. But looking at the CV as it stands, you can't say this is misrepresentation, this is fraud. I think for now, let's just accept that unless you can show that what is stated there, those are not accomplishments and that is false. There is no fraud there.
That, Commissioner, that is what I'm saying,
Yes.
that if BMW cannot confirm that,
Yes.
that she saved them 1 million, as she's stating in here, in the account, then she's making a presentation. And if I'm a panel member and I'm reading this CV, it's very impressive that we're looking for a manager. If we can get a person who can save a company so much money, then probably this is one person that I can shortlist. But BMW says now that information.
I think what I wanted to do was to show you that in the CV, the misrepresentation that is mentioned in the memo is not in the CV. I know where the problem could be on the issue of whether she has appropriate management experience.
Yes.
But that is a different topic, and maybe we will deal with that later on. For now, continue with the rest of your memo, because I was not probing you, but I just wanted to point out to you that the MBA issue, what she said in the CV is actually correct.
True.
And all the qualifications that she listed in her job application and her CV have actually been verified. And you've confirmed that.
I do.
Yes.
Commissioner.
So
Yes.
where there might have been a question mark is on whether she has appropriate management experience. But that's an issue for interpretation, because it's a term that is defined in another document, and even the way it is defined is a bit vague. But the CV as it stands, the qualifications are there, and there's no issue with them.
I agree. With regard to the qualifications, I agree. And like I said, those were verified, Commissioner. The issue of her being a manager, like I'm saying, if we have witnesses from BMW saying she was never a manager with us, that's the only information that we're working from. I cannot say, well, I must interpret her CV or her application otherwise. If BMW says she was not a manager and she says she was a manager, then to me it's a misrepresentation. I was going to call those two, if I was doing the trial of this case, I was going to call those two witnesses from BMW, human resource and immediate supervisor, who would have said to the court, she was never a manager with us. And therefore, how is she then shortlisted if one looks at the requirement of 3-year managerial experience in the field of the post? That is what, to me, at least at that time.
Yeah. No, and that is a fair question to ask, but I will deal with it with you when we get to the national instruction.
Thanks, Commissioner.
So I have a slightly different question, but maybe before I ask you my question, let me say in tongue-in-cheek that if you called those two BMW witnesses, I would have asked, is this an IDEC matter after all? I say that tongue-in-cheek. My question is, your memo seems to me at least, to cover or to raise questions that I would expect a prosecutor to ask before there is an arrest, before there is charging and people are made to appear in court. You seem to be asking basic questions. Am I correct in that observation?
You are 100% correct, Commissioner Baloyi. These questions, the team ought to have asked themselves these questions. When I come in 2 months after the arrest, I was not supposed to be asking these questions, especially if a person is charged with, that's what I'm saying, why did you charge them with corruption? Because I'm looking for the evidence of corruption in the 4 volumes in the docket. I can't find any evidence of corruption. The question that I'm asking, the team ought to have asked itself before making a decision that we are now ready, we're going to arrest. They should have asked themselves, are we going to be able to prove a gratification? Are we going to be able to prove that Ms. Mokwele received a gratification? And the intention element which the authors, Stayman and them, say, in order to denotes the intention element. That is why I keep on asking, in order to do what? She does not have to do anything to say, oh yeah, no, she gave them 500 rand or this or that, but the understanding between the parties that we're giving you this, we are corrupting you basically, and she's receiving on that understanding. These are questions that the team should have asked themselves. And the commissioners will see as we go on in one of my other memos, even if that had happened, I'm raising another question later, but your charge sheet is defective in a sense that you're charging them with section 4 of PRECA, which says, for subsection 1, paragraph A, a person, a public officer who is, so it talks to a public officer who is given a gratification and who accepts or receives or promises or agrees to accept a gratification from, paragraph B, a person from another person. Therefore, the reading of PRECA will tell you that the way they drafted their charge sheet, it was vice versa. They are saying the generals gave to a civilian, the generals being public officials. If one were to stick to the language of section 4, it ought to have been the other way around. The civilian should have been the one who was giving gratification to the generals, not the other way around. Because the generals are referred to in 4.1a. They should receive, not give. And this civilian should give, not receive. But in their charge sheet, they were They were having it the other way around. So these are issues that ought to have been looked at, and maybe the charge sheet also interrogated. But in relation to this is about evidence. Do you have enough evidence to go through your intended charge of corruption? My view at the time, Commissioner Baloyi, was that no. They should have been asked right from the beginning. But then you arrest. After arrest, it's only when you start investigating. Now, somebody can say, okay, what if Serunye did not come on 8 August? I wouldn't have asked these questions. Were you going to go on with that evidence that you had at the time? Was that sufficient? Would you have convinced the court that you have a prima facie case of corruption?
Colonel Parachi thought so, that there was enough to persuade a court that she would have committed a crime in the future, therefore she's guilty of an offense, an unknown crime. So someone in your office thought that there was a good case here, including of state capture.
Yeah. No, I don't agree with that. Definitely, it shows, if you read this as an independent person who comes after the fact, it tells you immediately there was a lot of investigation still outstanding. And you couldn't have arrested, go through the processes, bail application stuff, and then only do the investigations after. Especially, commissioners, that we're dealing with a high-profile case, or at least a case that involves the high-ranking officials in government. You don't just arrest people, put them into the court system, only to postpone for investigations. And these cases, we prepare them over a period of time. It's like in the lower courts where we receive decision dockets. I must prepare it in such a way that there's at least a prima facie case. When I put it on the court roll, the one thing that I must do is to postpone to seek a trial date. If the defense says, give us copies of the docket, to postpone for disclosure. But not to put a case on the court roll, which we have worked on. This case, I understand, started in December or November of 2024. And by June of 2025, they put it on the roll. For that 6 months, these issues ought to have been covered. You don't put it on the roll only to postpone it for investigation.
Is it fair to say that your memorandum, the questions that you're raising, suggests that your view at this point was that you don't even have a prima facie case yet, at this point?
Clearly there isn't a prima facie case. When I asked them, for the first question, why are the accused charged with corruption? You know, who corrupted who? I can't see it. There's no corruption. Who corrupted who here? So there's no prima facie case, not even on the lowest standard of corruption. There isn't.
She come back to you and tell you, no, you're wrong, we do, and these are the reasons.
But now, Commissioner, I was never engaged by the ID on this memo. At least the investigating officers tried to respond to some of my questions.
Yes.
But what they did basically was just to recite what the Act says, and not to deal with the questions.
Thank you.
You were actually playing devil's advocate because this is engagement between you and your colleagues. It wasn't you forming a conclusion one way or the other. You were simply saying to them, let's cover all the tracks. Let's make sure we've investigated this, we've investigated that. And I think all your questions, to be honest, are fair questions to ask if you are given a docket for the first time and you look at it. And then you say something very important somewhere in your statement, because you say even the arrest warrant should not have been issued on these facts.
Indeed, Commissioners, on these facts, there was no case. It couldn't have been. And maybe on the issue of the warrant, Commissioner Kumalo, when I first read the docket, because the statement applying for the warrant forms part of the docket, I remember having a discussion with Advocate Lachwa and asking her, how did the magistrate authorize this? And I remember she told me, on the first occasion when Brian Barayashi went to court to ask for a warrant, the magistrate turned him away, saying a statement.
So the one
And
that
so-
was
so
issued was the second one.
It was the second one to try.
There was one where the magistrate refused to grant the warrant, to issue the
There's
warrant.
one where, yeah, there must be one where the magistrate refused to issue a warrant because the magistrate was not convinced that there was a case. The magistrate who sits and does this. So the magistrate sent him back, and he went and compiled another one, went back, succeeded with the second one. But still, when I looked at the second one,
But why do you say it looks more like heads of argument than an affidavit?
it's because when I read it, it's like a person is trying to, it's like an argument. He's trying to justify why we want to have a warrant issued. But if you have
Chair said it has more conclusions than facts. That's how Chair put it. Is
which
that
I
also
agree
your
with.
view?
Which I agree with, commissioners. If you have a case, you have a case. You're not going to struggle with drafting an affidavit to apply for a warrant. And as a prosecutor, you're not going to struggle to draft a charge sheet. If you have a case, you have a case. And I always say to the juniors that come in as part of training, I say, you'll see, when you struggle to draft your charge sheet, you must know that there's something wrong with your evidence. If a person stole an item at OK on the 4th of August 2026, your charge sheet reads theft on such and such a day at or near OK Central, this person stole this item, you even describe it worth so much. But if you're struggling to put it into words, what did the person steal, where, when, then it tells you you have a problem, which is what I was encountering as I was writing this email. Who corrupted who, how? There was no evidence to support all that.
After your recusal, you may not necessarily have details, but I'm interested to know whether your questions, I know there was a response, but whether the substance of the issues that you were raising, to your knowledge as we sit here now, was the substance of your questions ever answered cogently?
Chair, they were not. And maybe that is why I wrote a second, or at least in the third trial preparation note. They were not. And I was saying to the evidence leaders as we were preparing this affidavit, and I said, well, I recused myself at least a month and a half after getting it, but if I had gone on and those questions were not answered, I would have withdrawn this case. I would not have prosecuted this case on the basis of the evidence available at the time, unless if all of these questions were answered. I would not have proved a case in any event, even if I went on trial, at least with the available evidence. So I asked questions and I made a follow-up, and I think I sent a third trial note where I got the response was confirmation of Ms. Mokwele's qualifications and one or two other things, but by and large, my questions remained unanswered.
Yes. I'll make a comment that I've made repeatedly during the testimony of the IDEC witnesses. We are not asking these questions so as to pronounce on whether the generals or the officers are guilty or not. But we are asking questions that may touch on whether there was a case at all, because for us at issue is whether charging the generals at all was improper. So questions of whether there was a case to start off with may be relevant to that question, which is relevant to what we are about. No, I thought I should just again, for those who may be asking themselves, but are they a court that's going to answer the question of guilt or not? So I thought I should just again repeat that comment. It's probably for the third time that I'm making that comment. Let me ask another question? When you sent your email with your several queries on the 16th of August, 2020,